What do you think the next 5 years into the future could look like with AI platforms?
I'd say from a teaching perspective, we're just going to have to think more creatively about assessments. I think the idea of just having a final paper that you do at the end of the semester and a couple essay exams probably isn't going to cut it anymore. So trying to think about ways, short-term and long-term, that you can sort of immediately do to respond, but then also being a little more creative and thinking about ways to incorporate it in ways that students can really harness the power rather than try to kind of resist and fight and police. So I don't know. I mean, I imagine that you'll be using AI to write essays and then using that as a first draft. And when it comes to writing research papers, I teach research methods. So I'm sure this will be an innovative way for people to do a lot of the background research and reading of literature in a much more efficient way. So I think there are definitely ways we can embrace this and make it something students can use as a learning tool rather than something to fight against.
Looking into the future, are you more excited or nervous for the future of AI?
I don't know if I'd say nervous. I'm excited to think about ways creatively in the long term. Yeah, I think right now, trying to understand how much students know and how they're going to utilize it, I think we're going to have to, those of us that are teaching are going to have to sort of follow their lead in ways to figure out ways that students find it useful to utilize AI before we can meaningfully plug into how we use it to assess and enhance student learning. But I don't know. I mean, it's gonna require some growth, I think, for students and professors, and some getting around a learning curve. But in the end, I mean, this is inevitable. So we're all gonna have to adjust and figure out how to adapt and hopefully harness and improve the way we do things.
What are some major positives and negatives when using AI?
I think some major positives are just the possibilities that it holds. I think we're just kind of scratching the surface right now in terms of what it can do. It's really encouraging to see that generative AI is kind of the big thing right now, because the core there is that it generates, it creates, it's creating inspiring kinds of content, and it's not just we're not just seeing cases where it's doing work for people, but it's actually creating. And I think really any kind of creating for the most part is a good thing. And I think as time goes on, our students are going to see that they can use generative AI as a tool to be creators themselves. So I think there's a lot of promise there. I think in terms of some challenges, of course, it's a change in the paradigm of education, and so of course that's going to require that both faculty and students do some things differently that they maybe haven't done in that way in the past. And so just it's that typical adjustment period.
Can you think of any more positives that you might, even coming from like a teacher's or a student's perspective, in the classroom?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of times in a lecture that I'm going to talk about a concept very briefly, and then I'll say, any questions? Of course, nobody has any questions because they're not going to ask, but they have questions. So being able to use it as a tutor for further explanation on a topic in a way that's more conversational rather than just a Google search, I think is going to be pretty helpful for students who might need a little bit extra help or just clarity on a specific concept. I think they can use it to check their writing. So if I am asking you to write something, can you use it to edit and improve and build upon the work that you've done? Eventually, I hear it's going to be able to also cite sources. So that'd be excellent, right? Because people will be able to provide references in ways that we're constantly trying to help students understand how to do and how to do correctly, because you need to attribute your resources. And if a computer can help you do that, great.
When AI gets brought up, most people, they automatically go to the negatives and they associate it with bad things. Like, if you had to guess, your opinion, why do you think people associate AI with negative? Like, why do you think people are so fearful of it?
Honestly, probably goes back to the movie The Terminator, stuff like that. I mean, I think, just the promise of AI has always been, it's going to take over the world, and maybe one day it will, but maybe not today or tomorrow. But I think if just pop culture has kind of gotten us conditioned to the idea that humans are on the way out and robots are on the way in, and so I know that might sound kind of crazy, but I think a lot of it might go back to that, just that humans are kind of replaceable, and maybe not to that level, but as I kind of mentioned in the workshop, just the idea that this is going to have an effect on the economy. I mean, a good example is just graphic designers. How graphic design is done is going to change, and that's just one small example. But people who have maybe aspired to be an artist or a graphic designer one day could easily find that the demand for those kinds of positions are going to change, and maybe not in a good way. Maybe it will be just a different way, but if nothing else, I think that we're just seeing, the whole point of AI is that it does stuff that humans have traditionally done, and as a result of that, it's going to cause people to just have to do things differently or change how people live and work.
Did you learn something new? And if so, what?
I did. I didn't know about Midjourney, so I've been using DALL-E for a while. I think it's very funny. I'm dyslexic, so I would type in dyslexic people thinking and seeing what AI thinks a dyslexic person thinking looks like. So that was really interesting. Yeah, I didn't know about Midjourney, so I can't wait to try that out and see what it thinks about things.
What did you enjoy the most about this AI workshop?
I like that it was so well attended. There were a lot of faculty here, and I like that it's really pushing us to think more creatively about our assignments. And I think that was very positive today, hearing a lot of those new ideas of how to incorporate AI into an assignment even.
How and/or how much do you think your teaching will be affected by this AI technology, if you had to guess?
Right now, I don't really see a lot of changes to be made in my assignments or my classes because I teach a lot of the Adobe suite, a lot of Adobe platforms, but I do know that AI and Adobe, I know that Adobe's incorporating more tutorials into their software. So like in the 90s when I learned, you got a textbook and you sat there and you leafed through it page by page. But now you can open up a program and there's like tutorials that are video tutorials, tell you where to click for what. So that's being incorporated more. So I see that as allowing me to get more into like how to create these things and less of like push that button, now push that button, now push that button. So I think it's kind of exciting, and I think it's going to continue that way.